And this next one is my favorite. It's called Car2. And I would encourage you to go home and look at Car2. Because what Car2 really tries to do is to take data once again and create contexts. So once again, looking at a website for SLAC, the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, it takes it and then makes context in terms of what SLAC does, who works at SLAC, who funds SLAC. So basically, once again, trying to tie these pieces of information together in a meaningful form. You're not going to be getting that in search engines like Google. But that's got to be the future of search if it's to be taken seriously as a learning space. Here's Reddit. Now, this is interesting. There's a lot of discussion in search engines I mentioned about search engine optimization. Some of you are familiar with the algorithm that Google uses, namely PageRank. What Reddit does is that it orders its site, it orders its responses based on the way in which users rank them. In other words, this first item is going to come up at the top simply because users of that search engine have said that it's a meaningful site, not because of some complex mathematical algorithm that Google has used to try to establish its utility. This is community learning. This is collaborative learning. Cloud computing is an interesting concept because basically what it says is that what we now perceive in knowledge, what we said about sharing and using data, why should it be tied to a particular architecture? In other words, if I am working, why do I have to limit what I'm doing to my computer? Why can't I access all of my files, all of my tags, all of my addresses from any computer that's on the network? Why can't my data live in the internet cloud? And then as I move around to different places, as I move around to different devices, that my data and my information moves with me. And people can share that information with me. That's what the concept of cloud computing is about. So once again, now it becomes, that's back to this idea that perhaps IT can augment our intelligence. It's not going to augment our intelligence if it's tied to our laptop. It's going to augment our intelligence if we're capable of accessing it no matter where we are, no matter what kind of device we've got, and we can get it presented in a comparable way. I should jump ahead. There's some confusion about clouds in terms of what they mean. It's not just consumer portals. It's not just Web 2.0 applications. But what it is access to software as a service. And once again, this is a concept. This is not necessarily a single technology. The idea here is that these ideas of cloud computing can fit into an entire spectrum. So how individuals can use it to accomplish their needs, how institutions can use it, how organizations and businesses can use this concept of information services and applications residing in a cloud. And that creates what is sometimes referred to as the cloud computing ecosystem that involves a lot of different people that once again are contributing to the storage and the communication of data and services. When we think about clouds or these learning clouds as learning spaces, what's an interesting thing about them is the fact that they are internet-based, they are device-independent, as I mentioned, it encourages collaboration, documents live in the cloud, as I mentioned, Now, another thing that we're going to see here is equitability, where you have these applications that are not dependent upon licensed software. How many of you have heard of or have used Google Documents? Google Documents is a good example of cloud computing. What you can do is you can create a document, a spreadsheet, a presentation, or whatever that exists in the cloud and can be modified or edited. You have control over who can do it, and be shared. It can be accessed anytime you have access to the internet. And it actually is compatible with licensed software formats. So let's say you have a group that doesn't have a license for Microsoft Office. It doesn't matter. Microsoft doesn't like that. It doesn't matter, because you can in fact read in the cloud. You can read documents that were created in Microsoft Office. You can generate documents that are readable by Microsoft Office, simply because that service is no longer residing on your computer where you have a license, but is residing in the cloud. That's an incredible concept in the way that it could potentially be used for creating learning spaces in the clouds, if you will. What are some of the drawbacks of cloud computing? Well, it's clear the fact that internet connectivity is going to be required. That you lose a lot of the functionality that, even though I say that now you can run desktop-like applications in the cloud, you lose some of the functionality that you're used to in your desktop applications. Things like drag and drop. Well, there's an answer to that. And the answer to that is a group of technologies that are addressing this issue of so-called offline web applications. Now, what do I mean by this? Is basically now the web has become a very familiar metaphor in terms of how to use it. You can go to a kiosk in the MTR to buy your MTR tickets, and it looks like a web page. So you know how to use that because you've used the web. So what we have in the case of these offline applications is saying, why can't we have more applications that operate like the web, that actually have the functionality of the web, but work when we're not connected to the internet? And when we do become connected to the internet, they synchronize themselves. So no longer does access to the internet become a drawback to using the internet as a source of data. An example of that is Adobe Air. So it helps you then create learning spaces using web content that operate the same whether you're online or offline.